Let the meltdown begin. MMA Meltdown on the Fight Network. I am Gabriel Morency. Let's do this thing as we put the pedal to the metal as the UFC goes to the Philippines for the first time. We've got a super fight light, as I'm calling it. Urijah Faber and Frankie Edgar throwing it down. Two Hall of Famers. I think you can make a legitimate argument about Urijah Faber being one, so-called first ballot Hall of Famer. The guy pretty much was the WEC. Frankie Edgar's put together a hell of a career as well. It seems as though that Frankie has a little more left in the tank, and it's ironic that the guy named the Kid is actually the older fighter. We've got an interesting card. For those of you that watch every fight, you're going to have to wake up pretty early in the morning. We got the pre-fight show at 7 a.m. Eastern Time, 8 a.m. The prelims from the Philippines. Reed Kuhn's going to join us, Fightnomics.com, the author, one of the best in the business. Reed Kuhn will step up and in and help us break down the upcoming fights. We'll send it to Costa Rica, bust some numbers with Joey Odessa. And we've got a great video of the week. Not videos of the week this week, but a great video of the week. And I think the timing is just absolutely freaking awesome for the video of the week. So without further ado, there's a lot of fights I want to get to tonight. So let's bring in Reed Kuhn off the top of the program. Reed, it's always a pleasure. How you doing, man?
I'm doing well. I'm not looking forward to waking up that early, but certain fights on this card are definitely worth watching.
No, for those of you on the West Coast, Reed, this is one of those in-betweens. Do you wake up or stay up? And I guess since you've got a young one, it's not really your decision whether you wake up or stay up. It's not your call. That's the judge's decision.
Yeah, exactly. I'll try to multitask with a bottle, but yeah, there are definitely some fights I am looking forward to seeing, and seeing them that early in the morning is fine with me, because at least the main event anyway is when they first announced that fight. It's one of those ones that you think about it, there aren't really any title implications here. One guy winning isn't going to change the title picture for either division, and yet you sit back and you think this is a pretty awesome fight between two guys who have been around a long time. They've been working at a very high level for a long time, and it should be a really fun fight.
Yeah, two great ambassadors for the sport as well, Reed. Two class acts, two guys that have represented the sport greatly. You look at Urijah Faber, a Hall of Famer. I mean, the guy pretty much was the WEC. It's too bad the timing for Dominic Cruz, that he got injured as soon as they sort of merged into the UFC. But, as I stated off the top, it's kind of ironic. The California Kid, as he's called, is actually the older fighter. And you're right, I'm in love with this fight. You got two great fighters. It really is sort of a super fight. I think Edgar thinks this is a title implication fight. And, you look at this fight, and even, stature-wise, they're pretty much the same. But with that being stated, is there any aspect of this, when you broke this down, Reed, was there any aspect of this that Urijah Faber is actually better at? Does he have better cardio? Does he have better conditioning? Does he have better wrestling? Does he have better stand-up? It seems like you sort of check the boxes on Frankie Edgar's side of the ledger.
Yeah, I did. I checked the box on a lot of metrics for Frankie Edgar, and but the one thing you're looking for, if you want to know what Faber is better at, it's his power. So he's no longer the California Kid. He turns 36, actually Thursday of this week. He'll already be in Manila for his birthday. He might have some old man strength now. He has 6 knockdowns. He has triple the knockdown rate of Frankie Edgar. Edgar is not really a knockout type of fighter. He's a constant pressure, very well-rounded, never going to gas out, just coming at you kind of guy. Urijah Faber is more reserved. Both these guys evolved their striking from their wrestling base very differently. And Faber holds back, he cocks his power hand, and he's waiting to unleash it on you when you come forward. And that's actually worked for him a few times. When it doesn't work, he ends up getting picked apart for a round, and he loses the round, and that's the problem. He has low activity. So if there's one way that Faber wins this, he does have a knockout threat, and I think that would, given where the odds are, that would be a pretty shocking upset. But everywhere else, Edgar does have slight advantages, and this will be one of the very few times where Edgar actually gets to fight someone roughly his own size. Yeah,
and it's a great point that you raised as far as the volume and then what Faber's going to be doing. And you're right, he's got that newfound power right now. We saw it against Michael McDonald, which he just sort of steamrolled him. It's a great call there with the old man strength. What I find interesting about this, of course, Faber, The mainstream's sort of given up on him. And, the knock is that he doesn't win the quote-unquote big fight. He doesn't win the title fight. And, in fact, he's never lost the non-title fight. But when you look at that, he's also never won as an underdog either. He loses the big fight, and then he looks really, really good. He rattles off a couple of wins. He gets back into the big fight again, and then he loses. I know this isn't a title fight, but to me, this is a big step up in class once again in competition for Faber.
Yeah, it is. Going back up to the featherweight division, he belongs at bantamweight, and at this point in the game, maybe the sport is starting to evolve more quickly than he can keep up with, but there's no question he has no quit in him. He has fought with broken bones before. He goes all out. It's just that from a strategic standpoint, if choosing to be the counter striker, you have to give up something, and that means round-to-round points. And facing Frankie Edgar, that's exactly the type of recipe that Edgar is great at. He's great at grinding people out and just outworking them. And even if he does get knocked on his ass, he's going to get back up and he's going to keep coming after you. So this is a really interesting matchup because it actually plays to both their strengths. Unfortunately for Faber, the cards probably won't like him, yet he still has that knockout threat, and we're going to have 5 rounds to see if he can do it.
Reed, we were talking about this in the studio right before the show started. I'm assuming it's the same cage they used in Australia, right? They just bring it over? I mean, it's pretty close. Is it regulation cage, or are they going to be using a smaller cage? Do you know?
I don't know for sure, but I did check the venue. I believe it's a full-size venue, so it should be a full-size cage.
That's what I was thinking as well.
You got to be there and eyeball it on fight week and actually see how big it is.
I was thinking, you mentioned as well, I don't think that Frankie Edgar's going to knock. I know he stopped BJ Penn. I know he stopped Gray Maynard, but I don't think he's going to stop Urijah Faber. As you stated, Faber's got so much freaking heart. And conversely, I guess if you think Faber's going to win, you're looking for that knockout punch, but I don't think he's going to win, and I don't think he's going to land that knockout punch. It's a great point that you just raised. Even if he gets tagged, he's probably just going to bounce right back up anyways. I was thinking about pulling the trigger with the over in this fight. If 3.5 would be ideal, but I imagine it's going to be 4.5.
Yeah, the current odds on Edgar are pretty steep, so the over, I think, is the safer play. Chances are this does go to a decision, and so the odds on that are going to be much more reasonable. More in the 2.5 to 1 range compared to Edgar straight up, who's already more than a 4-to-1 favorite.
Let's get to Mousasi and Philippou. It seems like Mousasi feels like he's like 38 years old or something. Like you said, Faber's turning 36. Mousasi's not even 30 years old yet. It blows my mind.
Yeah, he's been in the business a long time.
He looks old,
too. In this
too.
matchup, he's way more experienced, and yet he's also more than 5 years younger, so very strange.
Yeah, so he's a big favorite here. He's alternated wins and losses in his last 4 fights. But you look at the competition, he lost to Jacare, lost to Machida. He beat aging fighters in Munoz, who we'll get to in a second, and Dan Henderson. What do you make of this? Gegard's a huge favorite in this fight, nearly a 6-to-1 favorite.
Yeah, he's definitely the more well-rounded guy. Philippou was a boxer, and he certainly converted himself very well, but it was just a little too late in his career. He came onto the scene late in age-wise, but he was really just a boxer. He's good at that. He hits very hard. His knockdown rate is one of the highest on the card, and he's a headhunter. He basically just focuses on punching the other guy in the head. He's not mixing in a ton of kicks, certainly not going for a lot of takedowns. He only has 6 total takedown attempts in his entire UFC career, so he's not going to be taking the fight there. But Mousasi is rangy. He's young. He's experienced. He's well-rounded enough, I think, to handle this fight anywhere and to keep Philippou out of danger zone. So I think this is Mousasi's fight to lose. Again, kind of like the main event, Philippou certainly has the puncher's chance here because he's the harder hitter. Yeah,
if Mousasi, if he has any weaknesses, being reckless isn't one of them, right, Reed? He's not a reckless fighter.
Very conservative, good defense.
Yeah. So it's hard for a guy like, if a guy's a little reckless, you can say, hey, man, maybe get caught. Like Frankie's got a big ego and stuff. I think there'll be portions of the fight where they'll be standing in a pocket and going at it. But Mousasi's such a smart fighter, sort of like Machida-ish. So Luke Barnett, takes on Mark Munoz. Mark Munoz's swan song. It hasn't been pretty for Mark over the last couple of years. It's about 5 years ago. This guy was on a tear, and he was just beating the crap out of people. But, it's been a rough go for him. He wants to go out on top. Luke Barnett was undefeated. He's got a couple of losses right now, and it's pretty much, the guys that Barnett lost to as well. And I actually cashed a ticket with Narvaez as the underdog. He's 10 years younger. He's got a huge, height advantage, got a huge reach advantage in this fight as well. What do you make of this fight? Because, these other fights, the first couple we talked about, we got huge odds. This is a bettable fight as far as the number is concerned.
Yeah, it is, although there is some uncertainty with Mark Munoz. I mean, it's hard to know which Mark Munoz is going to show up. You're right. He was dominant for a while. He was, basically bordering on title contention, and then he's been on this awful win streak where he's just looked terrible getting knocked out. And at this point, 37 years old, he's now been dropped 5 times. His chin rating is among the lowest on the card. He is not really equipped to strike with MMA fighters these days. I think he was able to get by using his wrestling, which was very good, and it was enough of a threat to sometimes open up his hands. But at this point, I think people know what they're getting with him. He doesn't mix the two very well, or at least not lately. And he's shooting for a lot of takedowns, very low success rate, and I think he's probably just going to get picked apart on the feet. I mean, Barnett obviously has to stay off his back, but he's got the range and the takedown defense, hopefully, to do that, at least for him. And he's a slight favorite, so I would lean his way. I would lean Barnett.
Barnett's got to win this fight. He's lost 2 in a row, and it's the competition that he lost to, in Strickland and to Narvaez. I think he can win this fight, as you stated. I hate to make it so simplistic that if he can keep it standing, but I imagine that he will. He'll be able to keep the distance with the reach advantage. And Munoz is a great wrestler once he gets you down there, but he really telegraphs his takedowns, and it's gotten worse and progressed as years go on with him. All right, we only got about a minute left here, but something I'm looking forward to this Lim Magny fight, but I found something intriguing that I saw you tweet the other day, that this is the widest fight in UFC history at 159 inches.
Yeah, these guys are the two rangiest welterweights in UFC history, and they happen to be facing off. So these are two guys that have been able to utilize their reach to their advantage their whole careers, and then finally they're going to be basically on equal ground in terms of both being long. So the odds on this one are the closest of any fight we talked about, and I agree with that. I think this will be a very close match, and it's hard for me to pick a winner because Lim he looked great, and then not so great against top-level competition. So we're going to learn a lot about Lim, I think, in this fight, more so than Magny.
Yeah, and I totally agree with you. I think we're going to learn about Magny as well. He's facing a guy, normally Magny has that advantage, as you mentioned, the rangy advantage. Now he doesn't. He's going over to Asia to fight, a big fight, a guy with similar records. This is a really interesting fight, sort of a crossroads fight for both these guys' careers. Reed Kuhn, if you haven't got the book yet, you got to pick it up. It's a must-read for all you diehard MMA fans, bettors, analysts, media types, and everybody else in between. Follow Reed over at Fightnomics.com. You get the links to all of his work as well. Reed, it's always a pleasure. Thanks for the time.
Thank you.
There's Reed Kuhn with us. Always enjoy kicking it with Reed. We'll send it to Costa Rica. Joey Odessa coming up next.